first question, what is documentation? What do I mean when I'm talking about documentation? To document something. Does anybody know what documentation means? Adam, what do you think?
It means to create a record of it.
To create a record, that's pretty good. If you're documenting something, you're creating a record, and that's exactly what we're going to do when we're talking about MLA documentation. I may have alluded to an example at the beginning of the semester. When you're watching a movie, at the end of the movie, the credits roll, right? See who played what actor. You might even see like what music was used in the movie, what songs, right? If you pay enough attention, right? Maybe you hear a song you liked and you're like, oh, I want to know what song that was. Well, at the end of the credits, there should be something that creates a record of what song was used in the movie. For our purposes, documentation is a formal way to create that record. It's a formal way to indicate where you found the information that you decided to incorporate into your writing, into your essay. So it's a formal way of doing it. There are all types of ways to document information that you incorporate into writing. You could use footnotes, you could use parentheses, you could have a section at the back of the book, like just that says notes or sources. There are a whole bunch of different ways to do it, but I'm going to show you one particular way of going about documenting your sources, and it's called MLA documentation. MLA documentation is a specific style for indicating where you found that information. It's a specific style for documentation. APA is the other most popular style. There's also Chicago style, which is pretty popular too. Just depends on the instructor and the type of course that you're taking. APA, I know psychology classes use APA. A lot of the science classes will use APA. Has anybody ever used APA before? Yes? Okay. It's similar to MLA, but it's also different, and you have to make sure that you use the right style. So don't use the exact same methods in an APA paper that you do for MLA, or you might get yourself into some trouble.
I know MLA is the one that's always used in high school.
You always used MLA in high school?
Yeah, like they always made us do like a citation page.
Right.
Just bang them all out.
Does anybody know what MLA stands for? Modern Language Association. So if you're taking a class that's dealing with language, like English, right? English, Spanish, those type of language classes will use MLA. A lot of the arts and humanities classes will use MLA, like a music class, an art appreciation class, a speech class. Those tend to use MLA, whereas the sciences and psychology, they use APA. I think APA is American Psychiatric Association. Not that you really need to know that. That's not going to be the kind of thing that's on your quiz this week. The stuff that's going to be on your quiz is the application of this knowledge, not just the facts. Alright, it's a formal style. It's a formal style of documentation, which means there are all types of rules and regulations that you have to follow. And that's the bad news. Many specific rules. That's why I gave you a 30-page section in your textbook to read this week. To read and review and annotate, because that section is full of the rules and regulations. Alright, here's the good news though. The good news is that you don't have to memorize all those rules. You don't have to memorize them. You just need to know how to refer to your textbook. I'm sure everybody took a driving test at some point, right? To get your driver's license? I hope so. Wouldn't it have been nice if you could have brought the driver's manual with you to take the test? No? Oh, really? Well, is it timed? I don't know if it's timed or not.
I don't think.
Has anybody taken it recently?
I took it last year.
Was it timed?
I think so.
It was?
Yeah.
I think it would be nice to have the manual.
It wasn't like a ridiculous amount of time though. Like it was
Right.
like a big.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, when you write your essays, it's not exactly timed until the very end of the semester, but you're not going to have to do documentation then, so that won't matter anyway. But when you do your process essays where you incorporate research, it's not timed. So if you have your textbook, if you have all the rules in front of you, then there's really no excuse to make a mistake with your documentation, because everything's right there. You have the resources to do this. You don't have to keep these memorized, which is great. I don't have them memorized. And I'm the instructor. I know, you're shaking your head, but you know why I don't have them memorized?
You always have the book.
Well,
Not
I always have the book.
Same book. So
I try and keep it with me.
You always have a resource.
I can use online resources too. You can go outside your book and use online resources to help you. Like the Purdue Online Writing Lab is a good one. The one where I just showed you the thesis statements versus purpose statements, that was a good resource too. But that's not why. I can't memorize all this stuff because I don't have room in my little brain, to be perfectly honest with you. I've got enough to remember. I've got like 8 different passwords I need to remember just to, get into my computer and get into Angel. And I'm sure you guys have the same deal, right? Maybe you have bigger brains than me, but still, we have a limited capacity, right? There's only so much we can remember. This is what I do for a living, and I don't have it memorized, and that might sound like that's not a good thing, but guess what? They change the rules. Every couple years, they print new editions and change the rules. So I can't possibly rememorize all the new rules that they change every couple. You know why they change the rules every couple of years? Do we want to take a guess?
So, cheating? No.
No, that's a good guess though.
Politically correct.
Politically correct. You're getting onto the right track. The Modern Language Association, all the information in that 30-page section that you're assigned this week, all that information, they publish their own book with that information in it. It's called the MLA Writer's Handbook or something like that. So why did they change the rules every couple of years?
Oh,
Come on,
to
think.
make more money.
To make more money, so they can sell more books, so they can have a new edition with a couple extra rules in it, right? That's kind of conspiracy theory, but there's some truth to it. There is. So anyway, I don't memorize these things because if I do, then I'm not relying on the latest edition, and I might get something wrong because I'm relying on a rule that's 8 years old and they've updated it. Does that make sense? So instead of just trying to memorize the new rules as they come out, I just use the book, or I use the web resources, just like you should do. But that should make your lives a lot easier. It really should. All right, why do we have to document? So in expository writing, which is persuasive writing, and it's academic writing that we're doing in this class, and if it's academic, that means that it's going to be research. We're going to use some information from outside of our brains. We have to document for a few reasons. Anybody think of some reasons why we would document our sources?
To give credit.
Well, why would we do that?
Because plagiarism.
Okay, plagiarism. Plagiarism is a bad thing, right? That's not something you want to do. It's academic dishonesty, it's cheating. So it avoids plagiarism. Good, what else?
That basically, it's not exactly foreign knowledge from the beginning. It's kind of regurgitated.
Okay.
Someone else's knowledge.
So why give credit?
Because you want someone else to find your sources.
Okay, to help the reader find the sources. That's another reason. Any other reasons you can think of why we document where we get our information from?
To back up your opinion.
Okay, to back up your opinion, you're almost there. So why would you do that?
To show your reasoning.
Yeah, to show your reasoning, but there's another reason.
To shut down the argument. I guess.
I think you're onto it. Let's see what I have here. I've got a couple reasons. I think we hit a couple of them already. This gives reader proof that some of your support for your thesis is credible. Okay, so it backs up your reasons, but it shows that it's credible if you're documenting good sources, right? As long as the sources you choose are decent sources. By extension, this gives you credibility. If I'm selling basketball shoes and I somehow get LeBron James to advertise my basketball shoes and wear them when he plays, well, now my company has credibility as an athletic apparel company, right? Because I have an athlete that's using my product. I would want to say, LeBron James wears my shoes, right? I wouldn't want that to go unknown if I'm trying to sell the shoes. So it gives me some credibility. It says credibility is important. I know it's hard to read. There's a video link to it. Let's see if it'll work.
Right answer.
How about just diagramming this accident with my State Farm Pocket Agent app? You can also get a quote and pay your premium with this thing.
I thought State Farm didn't have all of that.
Where'd you hear that?
The internet.
And you believed it?
Yeah, they can't put anything on the internet that isn't true.
Where'd you hear that? The internet.
Oh, look, here comes my date. I met him on the internet. He's a French model.
Bonjour.
State Farm, more mobile than ever.
Credibility is important, right? Establishing credibility, having credibility is important. All right, there's another reason why we document our sources. And we already said this. It allows the reader to find the same source or the sources that you use. That's important. The reader may want to know more information. The reader might not believe you. The reader might not believe your source or whatever quote you use from a source. And they might want to see it for themselves. So this allows them to do that. If you follow the rules of MLA documentation, you'll give the reader all the information they need to find the same source. Remember, your number one job is to make the reader's life easier. You want to make things as easy on the reader as possible. You want to make it easy for them to understand your argument. You want to make it easy for them to find your sources. You want to make it easy for them to follow your logic and your train of thought. You want to make it as easy as possible for them to actually read the words and the sentences in your essay. That is your job. All right, there's another reason we document. It's a nice thing to do. When people help you, it's a nice thing to say thank you and to acknowledge that someone helped you. These sources are helping you build your argument, if you do it right. You'll be drawing information from experts in their fields, and it's a nice thing to acknowledge them. Even if they don't even find out that they've been acknowledged, it's still a nice thing to basically say, here's the information I got from a credible source. This person took some time to develop this information. Here's where it came from. So it's just a nice thing to do. You know, think about an award show when someone accepts an award. Typically, they're going to thank people, right? Usually thank God. They usually thank their parents, their teammates, maybe their producers, their co-actors, things like that, right? Their bandmates, whatever it might be. Because those people help them win the game, make the movie, make the album, right? Last but not least, keeps you from automatically failing an assignment due to plagiarism. So if you don't care about any of these three reasons, you should probably at least care about the fourth one, right? You don't want to automatically fail the assignment because you didn't document properly. Fair enough? That is why we do it. Alright, here's a quote. Plagiarism is like speeding. The teacher doesn't care if you did it by accident. Just like the cop doesn't care if you were speeding by accident, right? Well, he might care a little bit, but you're still going to get a ticket. No, they don't care. Alright, so my advice is proceed slowly and cautiously, especially when it comes to documenting. Alright, take your time. Make sure you get it right. Use your resources. Use your book. Use websites if you need to. There's my Super Troopers guy. Here's an example of MLA documentation. So I'm going to walk you through how to do this, right, in the next 30 minutes or so. First, I have a thesis statement. I've got an argument. I found my topic, developed a thesis statement. My subject is school systems. My opinion is that they should discontinue athletic programs. That's going to be my thesis statement. Okay? It doesn't really matter if you feel strongly one way or the other about this. It's just an example. I'm actually a really big sports fan, but I do tend to lean this way. I think schools should probably discontinue their athletic program. If that's going to be my opinion, I need to back it up. I need reasons, right? This is an argument. If I have an opinion, I need reasons. Let's see if I came up with any reasons. I did. Here's one reason why schools should discontinue their athletic programs. Because local park and recreation departments can support athletic programs. That's going to be one of my arguments. All right. Is that a decent argument? Is that valid?
How did you say it?
In your opinion.
It's more.
In my opinion, it is. Is it a possible logical argument as opposed to just saying because they should?
It is because they give it.
Okay, they already do it, right?
Yeah.
They already do it. There are adult athletic teams you can do through a park and rec association. There are youth athletic leagues you can do through Hall County or Gwinnett County or whatever county you're in. Typically, they provide those athletic activities, right? That's going to be my argument, at least part of it. My second point, the money saved could save or create jobs in education. So I've got to do two things here. I've got to prove, number one, that it would save money, right? It's kind of my first job, to prove that it will actually save money. And I've got to show that that money could create jobs. Does that seem like a logical reason? Maybe, if I prove my
Yeah,
point.
you could, but you would have to use statistics.
Okay, statistics and numbers might help me there.
Use like graphs as your source.
Good. All right, number 3, the emphasis of schools should be educating. There's a novel idea, right? What do you think most kids care more about? The sports or their classes?
Sports.
I bet the athletes tend to care a lot more about the sports. Maybe even some of the non-athletes, right?
And you could use have some you use statistics in articles about how some students are technically failing in classes, but
Right.
teachers lose them up.
Adam's thinking ahead. He's already thinking, how can I go about proving these points? His wheels are turning here. He's saying, okay, how am I going to make these points to support the argument? That's good. So you're already thinking about where I could get information. That's excellent. My question becomes, where can I add proof? Where can I add evidence? And Adam's already thinking in that direction. He's saying, you could go here, you could go there, you could find this information or that information.
Like the one thing you really want to do is use graphs and charts, though, rather than
Maybe, but in academic essay writing, I would say stay away. You can use those to pull the information from, but you're not going to want to put graphs and too many charts and too many visuals into your essay.
So you could use one, but otherwise you want to use articles.
You can use graphs and charts, but your job is going to be to take the information from those graphs and charts and put it into your own words, and that's where things get a little bit tricky, because now what you're doing is paraphrasing, because you can't really quote something that's visual.
Information.
So it's usually a lot easier if you can find something that's written as opposed to something that's just strictly visual. But typically, if you find a graph or a chart, it's usually accompanied by written information, sentences and paragraphs that you can quote from. So my question is, where can I add proof? Which one of these main points could I find a source to help me support? What do you think?
Alright, so for the first one, you can kind of use articles on, how local parks and rec support not only middle school teams, but also teams like boards.
All right, so he says articles I could use to support this. Somebody else tell me, where could I find something? Where, in particular, might I find something to support this? For what? What one? What place? What website should I go to? Perfect. He said go to the Park and Rec department, right? I could go to Hall County Park and Rec. I don't even know if they have one, but I could Google it and find out, right? Probably wouldn't take that much work to find. So that's a great idea. So, point number 1, I could support it with proof. If the evidence is there, right? If they say, if I go to their website and they say, we're all out of money, we are cutting all our programs. From now on, we're only going to be emptying the trash at the playgrounds, but we're not going to do anything else. Well, now I'm in trouble, right? Now I need to rethink this idea, or go find a different park and rec department that maybe supports my thesis, right? But that's a good idea. I could go to the actual park and rec website. What about this? The money saved could save or create jobs. Can I find information to support that somewhere?
Yeah, you can.
Where?
I don't know. You can use an example as a lot like schools that are cutting their music programs or music and art programs.
Where am I going to find that?
Newspapers.
Department of Education, open records, and I think that's for every state in the country. If you have state entities like schools that's being funded by taxpayer dollars, that information is available to the public because it's your money that's paying for it. It's your money that goes to subsidize this school, Hall County high schools, Hall County elementary schools. Whenever your taxpayer money is being spent on public things, that information has to be available, whether it be online or through open records request. This one's pretty easy, actually. When it comes to education and a lot of government entities in the state of Georgia, if you go to open.ga.gov, salaries and travel reimbursements, you can pull the salaries for any educator in the state.
Any state, I can look at my salary, y'all can look at my salary.
Where do you work?
At the prison.
Oh, at a prison? Okay, so a state-funded prison, right? Taxpayer money is going to fund the prison. So if you work for the state of Georgia, your salary is public information. My salary is public information. If you really care to know how much anybody at this school makes, you can look it up. So any state employee. Who do you think the highest paid state employee is? Anybody know?
Shoot, probably the mayor.
You can look at the governor.
Mayor of Atlanta, governor of Georgia, those are good guesses, but they are wrong. There's somebody that makes far more than the governor of Georgia. And he is like the highest position.
The superintendents.
Yeah, it's cool.
Not the superintendents, but that's a good guess.
Not the deans of the universities?
Not the deans of the universities, but that's a good guess. There are maybe 2 or 3 states in the country where it's like an academic position, like dean of the medical school of the big university or something like that. But the majority of states in the country all have the same position as the highest paid state employee.
Coaches.
Which ones?
Football coaches. Are you
You're,
serious?
you're right. Mark Richt is the highest paid state employee in Georgia.
Wait,
he
you
makes
count-
like $3 or $4 million or
They count
something
him
like
as a
that.
state employee?
Yes, he's a state employee
Why? I mean,
because he works for the University System of Georgia.
I gotcha. Okay.
It's a public college. So he is the highest paid state employee. How about that? And he makes more than his boss. The president of the University of Georgia makes far less than Mark Richt does. And that's his boss. Does that seem right? It seems a little bit weird, right?
Like any athlete though, you gotta pay them to keep them.
That's true. Most athletes make more than the coaches of the teams, right?
It's weird because football
So-
and sports are
Right. And that's what I'm trying to say. That's part of my argument, right? Where is our emphasis as a society if the highest paid state employees are football coaches as opposed to something else?
Yeah.
Right? As opposed to the governor or some other person.
We're not like an intelligence-based society anymore. When you think about it, I mean, when it comes to entertainment,
Right?
like on a Sunday afternoon, you're not going to catch most people sitting there watching a documentary.
Right.
You're catch them watching NFL football.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a good thing.
It's a good thing. Hey, I'm a football fan, so I'm making this argument against my better interests, but I still believe that maybe our values as a society are a little bit off. If we're paying a football coach $4 million, whereas the governor is getting far less.
And people make arguments for that all the time. The thing is, it's like the government. It's like no one wants to make sacrifices for what they want. Like no one wants to say, well, our government sucks, so we have to pay more taxes.
Taxpayers are not gonna pay a government employee,
Well, why will they pay a football coach that much?
because they're not even in the same category.
Because
You can't
most
even
people
do-
love football.
But they are. I can pull them
No.
up on this website right here. They're
They're not
state
on the same
employees.
payroll, but as far as categories, they're in two different categories.
It's like the fact that spending money makes money. For example,
That's
if
true.
you have an awesome Georgia football team.
That's very true.
Apparel is going to sell. TV ratings are going to go up, and the college is going to make more money.
That's absolutely
Mark
true.
Richt is going to make more money. So it's all just a big circle of money.
That's it, and that becomes a good counter argument to my thesis statement. People will say school systems have athletic programs because they bring money into the schools, right? That's going to be one of the counter arguments, and that's something I have to deal with if this is going to be my thesis statement and my persuasive essay. I'm going to have to deal with that because some schools have high school football programs that sell 1,000 tickets for $7 or $8 a piece every Friday. That brings in a lot of money. Now, what I would have to prove or disprove if somebody was making that argument, I would have to say, yeah, that makes a lot of money, but how much money is the volleyball team making? How much money is the soccer team making? How much money is the girls softball team making?
How much
Not to
money
pick
are
on,
the Lakers making?
these different sports, but they don't bring in the money that football brings in. So is the football team really bringing in enough money to subsidize all of those other sports? If so, then maybe you've got a logical argument for keeping them, at least on the money side of things. But that's why I have other points in my essay, right? So anyway, here is Pamela, right? Here's where Pamela said we could get information on salaries. Now remember, my point was that the money saved could save or create jobs. So here's where my thinking goes. I need to find, I can use one school as an example, or I could use multiple schools. More examples is better, always. But I could look up a high school and guess who usually, not always, but guess who the highest paid employee in a high school usually is?
High school football
The
coach.
high school football coach, especially in the state of Georgia. Usually makes more than the principal, usually makes more than his boss. Not always, but in many cases.
He doesn't want to keep high school football coach the same way as Mark Richt.
It's a similar idea, but Mark Richt doesn't teach any classes at the University of Georgia, does he?
No.
He doesn't. Do high school football coaches teach classes? Are they?
They're required to.
They you're laughing. Why are you smiling? A history teacher?
A history
Okay.
teacher or a weight training coach?
Weight
Probably
training.
coach.
I know there are some schools, and I'm not going to name any names, but there are very successful schools in the state of Georgia. I'm talking state championship schools.
Usually.
And their highest paid employee in the school was, at least at one time when they were winning the state championship, he was the ISS teacher. You know what the ISS teacher does, right?
He just chills.
He like babysits, right? Like kind of sits there and
Shut up.
that's about it, right?
Except no one shuts up.
And he's making more than any of the other teachers in the school. Any of the other teachers, right? Is that right? This is where my argument is going anyway.
It's not.
So I can pull that information here. I can pull a school. I can pull the school's salaries. I can sort them by lowest to highest, highest to lowest, right? So if anybody want me to pull a particular school?
Shoot, man, look up Lanier High School.
Near high school?
Yeah.
They don't have a good football team. They probably don't pay the
No,
coach.
yeah, they do.
They're
They
they're
beat it
on
last
roll
year.
this
Yeah.
year.
Lanier High School?
Yeah. I mean, we sucked like Friday, but we went we beat them 3 years ago.
So that's Gwinnett County.
Yep. Then look up Corey Mobs.
That's what. What's his last name?
Corey Mobs.
How do you spell his last name?
Korey.
That's the last name.
Movs. Just Mobs.
Is he the head coach?
Yeah. He's a good dude too.
Oh, it's not that much. All right, so I've got a problem here. $60,000 is not what I was expecting it to be, but the coaches typically don't just get their money from the school; they also get money from the booster club. So I'd have to figure out, can I find the booster club information? This still might support my point, though. What do you think an average teacher makes?
Probably about 40,000.
Probably closer to 40.
And the thing is, he's a weight training coach. He's not like a history teacher or a math
Right.
teacher or anything like that. He teaches weight training, which isn't bad. You can't knock him for doing something he loves.
Right.
But the thing is, he's generally a football coach. I mean, he teaches weight training to be a football coach, and that's basically just hiring a football coach, which in the end is kind of jacked up when you have people who went to Harvard. I mean, teaching math and they're only making
40,000, right? 40,
They're not
50,000.
even-
So here's the point. If I can prove that this is higher than average, this is higher than what the average teacher makes, then I could say we could get rid of his job, save $10,000, and we could use that to pay other teachers more. Or we could fire 5 of the coaches, save $50,000, and bring in another teacher.
So you go make somebody lose their job?
Yeah, they can go apply at the Park and Rec department.
No.
You're forgetting, Pamela. I said that Park and Rec departments can handle it, so they can hire the football coaches and pay them.
Give them a pay cut. Don't make them lose their job. They can still be a
They're
weight
not
trainer.
losing their job. They're going down the street to the Park and Rec department and saying, "Hey, you guys are starting a football program. You need a coach."
Would they be making
Go
the
ahead.
same amount of money?
Your argument for saving money though, I mean, it's kind of like you don't know where it goes later in the end because not very many people are reliable. I mean, they built a bridge for nothing over there across from town in Park Base.
Right.
It goes nowhere.
Right.
So I mean, they just use it for speculation.
Yeah, that's true, and there's only so much I can do with my argument. But let me pick another team. Who won the state championship last year?
Buford. Just go with Buford.
I don't know if I'll be able to get them. What about like 5A or 6A? Who won?
I don't know.
Gainesville won?
Gainesville won? Are you serious? We beat Gainesville. Bad.
You know the coach's name by any chance? I could do, I know Gwinnett, Norcross won a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And their coach is. There it is, in-school suspension teacher, ISS teacher, $72,000. That's a lot of money. You could hire a new teacher for like high 30s. That means you could, if you got rid of his position, you could hire 2 teachers, one to teach ISS and one to teach something else, for the same amount of money. Do you see where my argument is going from a logic standpoint? Yes? I understand your emotional plea to say, you can't fire people, you can't, they'll lose their job. I understand that argument. But if I make my first point, the Park and Rec departments can handle it, and they start the football program, well, he's not out of a job. He's just out of a job in the high school. He's now working for the county elsewhere. Yes?
Yeah, but how many schools you have in the county, you only got,
Is there a way you can,
yeah, you got one.
I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can. I don't know exactly how to, but yes, we could definitely look up funding for Park and Rec departments too. Absolutely.
That's the thing though, like if you're firing all the athletic coaches from all the schools,
Right.
You, like from the whole school, you're gonna be saving millions of dollars.
Right.
Like, when you actually break it down.
Right.
Which really, when you think about it, you can't make an argument against that. Granted, you can say, well, you know, taxpayers and these payments.
Oh, there are plenty of arguments against it. There are plenty of arguments against what I'm saying here. And people say that, you know, you need to motivate the students to come, and some students wouldn't come to school if it weren't for the athletic programs. That's a decent argument. Go ahead.
how did you look up the school?
I didn't pull it by school. I had to do it by county. So you could pull up an entire county if you wanted to.
County, I haven't figured that out.
What's that?
How'd you pull up the county? 'Cause I went to
Let's see. Back to search. I did advanced search, and then you've got to go to organization, and then you can pull up by county.
Can you look up?
So if you know the instructor's name or the coach's name,
Yeah.
you pull it up by county, and then you can find it.
Can you look up
In
Bob
a
Spire?
word, you know, all these
Gwinnett
kids are
County?
gonna be looking at their teacher salaries now.
That's okay. I mean, it should be public information, though. I mean, if your money is going to pay those salaries, then you should know.
Bob Spire is real big where I'm from. He's in North
But
Carolina.
and you have to remember too, some of these salaries are augmented by the booster clubs, whatever they're paying the coach to. Is it this one? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes. What does he coach?
He's the football coach at North Gwinnett. Oh snap!
There we go. So that's a pretty good salary, on top of whatever the booster club gives him.
Yeah.
All right. So anyway, back to my argument.
So in theory, he's making 6 figures. Booster club.
Possibly, quite possibly. All right. So we have my main points, and I was asking where can we find proof. What about the third point? Emphasis of schools should be on educating.
It's almost ethical.
How could I prove it, Pamela?
Just pull up students' SAT scores.
Okay, pull up. So what if I pull up the SAT scores from? I'm going to pick on Norcross, right? Because they won the state championship 2 years ago. What if I pull up the SAT scores and they are, I don't know, average for the state? They're in the 50 percentile, but their football program is in the number 1 percentile, right?
And all their students have good grades because they kind of bumped them up a little bit. That happened to me in high school. I was a decent football player my freshman year.
Right.
And great. You know, and my grades were, I didn't really try in school my freshman year because my grades were bumped up. My grades were at a B/C average because they wanted me to play. And
Okay.
then, once I stopped playing my sophomore year, they said, all right, you're on your own.
So that would go to support this point. That would be more like a case study, right? If I had, yeah, that's anecdotal evidence from your point of view, which you might be able to use anecdotal evidence because you dealt with this issue. So you could say you have some level of expertise in this.
So you could also say it's coincidence. You can also throw out there, yeah, well, it's freshman year.
Well, and you could also say it's a coincidence or it's not based on a large enough sample size. If you could say this happened to 4 or 5 of my friends as well, then you've got a better case. Where else might I be able to find information?
Different statistics mostly, but different surveys as well.
Okay. Doesn't always have to be statistics. What if I just find, I don't know, a 30-year veteran teacher that says I've been teaching for 30 years, and what I've found is that You know, the more emphasis we put toward athletics, the worse the students' test scores are, or the less they care about academics. Like, if I find a teacher or a superintendent, or heck, our federal government has a Department of Education. If I find what is his name? Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan, I think is his name. If I could find something where he says the emphasis of school should be on educating as opposed to other things like extracurriculars, well, that could support my argument too. Arnie Duncan was actually a college basketball player, so I don't know if I catch him saying that.
But you also have to throw in your own arguments and your own.
These are my arguments. I'm just using experts to help me. What do you think, Lacey?
Some of the grades that some students don't necessarily play the sports,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't necessarily pay attention either, so you can't like view the school as a whole.
Okay. So what would I have to do then?
You probably have to just kind of single out the select few that play.
Okay, and that's dangerous if you start singling out, because you don't want to cherry pick your evidence, right? You don't want to mislead the reader. Like, your job in making an argument and hopefully winning your argument, you don't want to do it deceptively, because then you didn't really win. Like, you just tricked somebody, and that's not the goal of persuasive writing. The goal is to make a logical argument that, has validity, as opposed to just trying to cherry pick this number or that number. Like, if I just pick the highest paid coach in the state and use that as my only example, what I'm really doing is leaving myself open to a counter argument, right? Where somebody finds a couple coaches that are paid less than the average teacher, and they say, this is wrong. Your argument is completely baseless because these coaches are paid less than the average teacher, so you would not save money by firing these coaches.
So basically, you gotta keep your argument airtight.
Yeah, that's your job. That's your job, and you don't want to do it deceptively because then you're just creating an opportunity to lose the
So
argument.
instead of saying, oh, mobs is paid more than $55,000, which is the average for a teacher, you can say, well,
The average coaching salary is
11
X.
out of 12 coaches are paid more than the average
Yes.
teacher salary.
Yes, that would be much better. All right, so the question is, where can you add proof? And based on your responses, you can add proof to any of these points, and you should add proof. That's the goal. That's how you make a good argument. All right, how do you go about adding proof? We said one example. What's your name, sir? Mike. Mike said that we could go to the website for the Park and Rec Department, and that's actually exactly what I did. So this is Hall County's Park and Rec Department. I know it's difficult to read, so I'll read it for you, but underneath that picture, it says the HCR, I guess that's Hall County Rec. Athletic Division offers youth sports for boys and girls ages 6 to 14 in conjunction with our County Youth Sports Association booster clubs. Sports include tackle football, basketball, baseball, softball, and cheerleading. So my main point was that Park and Rec departments could handle it. This quote right here seems to support my main point. What would the counter argument be that I have to be prepared for based on what this says right here? What about the high school age kids, right? They say 6 to 14. So that's a legitimate counter argument, and I need to be prepared for that, and I would be. I would say, even though the Park and Rec Department does not currently offer sports for high school age students, if they can offer it for ages 6 to 14, and they can offer adult sports programs too, they could obviously handle ages 15 to 18, right? And I'd say they currently aren't doing so because the high schools are. If the high schools weren't doing it, they would have the opportunity to do so. That's right. So here's the information from the website, word for word. That's exactly what it says. The question now becomes, do you use a direct quotation, which means use the exact words, or do you paraphrase, which means kind of put it into your own words? My advice for you in this class is to always use direct quotations and to avoid paraphrasing. Paraphrasing has pitfalls. Paraphrasing comes with risks. Direct quotes does not have nearly the same type of risk that direct quotations do. But you could potentially do either. I'll show you how to paraphrase, but I'm trying to convince you not to paraphrase in your essays. I'll show you how to do it though, just so you know what I'm talking about. So either one could work. Here's how a direct quotation would work. You don't change the original wording at all. You try your best not to change any of the wording. Once you start changing the wording, you could get yourself in big trouble, especially if you don't do it technically using brackets or ellipses. If you don't use those things and you change anything from the direct quotation, you could get yourself in big trouble. You'd be misquoting. All right, when you take a direct quotation, you also want to add a signal phrase. Always, always, always add a signal phrase. A signal phrase is just words that introduce the quote. Sometimes they come at the end. They follow the quote. Say, was said by such and such. Sometimes they come in the middle. You also want to add quotation marks. This indicates to the reader this information is word for word from a source. So here's an example. This is what it would look like. According to the Hall County Department of Parks and Leisure. That is the signal phrase. That's my words. That's why it's not in quotation marks. Quote, the HCPL Athletic Division offers youth sports, blah, 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 blah. End quote. Those are the exact same words. I didn't change anything about it at all. The only thing I did was add my signal phrase. I could have started with this. Quote, the Hall County Parks and Leisure Association offers youth sports, comma, according to their website. That would be my signal phrase at the end. Or I could do it in the middle. The Hall County Department of Parks and Leisure, end quote, according to their website, start the quote again, offers sports for blah, 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 blah. So the signal phrase has to be there, but it could go beginning, middle, or end. Usually it goes at the beginning. Usually that's the easiest way to do it. Questions about that? All right, here's how a paraphrase would work. You don't keep the original wording. None of it. You can't. You don't just change a few words, because then you have some of the original wording and it's just a misquote. So you can't keep any of the original wording. This is important for your quiz. This is very important for your quiz. You need to understand the difference between quoting and paraphrasing. And you're going to have to identify whether or not something was paraphrased or quoted correctly. And if it has the original wording, and it doesn't have quotation marks, you might need to think about that one. So you don't keep the original wording in a paraphrase. You summarize the idea. You boil it down. So paraphrasing is really only good when you have a lot of information that you have to really boil down for the reader, when you have a lot of stuff you don't need. But there's another tool you can use instead of paraphrasing, and that's called the ellipsis. If you want to just take parts of a quote or parts of a sentence, you can do that using an ellipsis to indicate where you left words out. So you're not really changing the wording, you're just leaving some of it out. Use that dot, dot, dot to indicate where you left words out of the quote. But with the paraphrase, you summarize. Here's an example. This is from the same website. Many local governments already offer youth athletic programs. Hall County, Georgia offers at least 5 different sports for school-aged children. Notice I didn't name the sports. I didn't use the same language at all. Right? I completely reworded it. You won't find any of the same words at least strung together, except for maybe youth athletic programs. I think their website said like youth sports instead. So I reworded everything, and look how much shorter this is. Remember, the first version was like that long. I really boiled it down here. So that's what a paraphrase would look like. Warning, paraphrases can be better when you're dealing with longer sections of information, but they can lead to misinterpretation and misquoting. I would avoid them. They're very dangerous. They get people in trouble. They get students in trouble. All right, so where do I give credit? Now that you've learned where to find your information and how to work it in, you need to know where to give the credit. There are 3 potential places where you give credit. Number 1 is in the signal phrase. According to the Hall County website, that's the signal phrase. You're giving credit there. You're saying this is where it came from. So that's 1. And it would look like that. Same as my example. I highlighted where I'm giving credit. I'm not done yet, though. That's only 1 place I give credit. Got to do it in 3 places. The second one is called an in-text citation. In-text citation. It's also called parenthetical citation, because it appears in what? Parentheses. It appears in parentheses. So it's in text. It's in the text of the paper. It's in your paragraph. It's in the sentence. And it appears in parentheses. And it looks like this. So I've got my signal phrase, right? There's one spot. According to the Hall County Department of Parks and Leisure, comma. That's 1. At the very end, I've got athletic division in quotation marks. Now there is a very good reason why it doesn't say Hall County Government or James Smith. Anybody know what that reason is? Alright, there is a basic way to create an in-text citation. The basic format is author, last name, and page number. That's the basic format. But when I go to the Hall County website, when I go here, I looked up and down the page and I didn't see an author name for this sentence anywhere. So I couldn't put an author name. I couldn't put a page number because it's a website and it didn't have page numbers. Sometimes websites do. You scroll to the bottom, it says click to go to the next page. I didn't have that here. So I didn't have an author last name. I didn't have a page number. So I've got to go to the next thing. Your textbook. This is where your textbook comes in incredibly handy. If you go to page, I think it's 484. Yes, 484. That I do have memorized because that's an important number. I always have to go to page 484. This is a menu of how to document things and how to put things in an in-text citation. 484, and then I go over to, let's see. I go down the menu there and I'm looking for something from a website. Author unknown, page 490, that might help. Let's see what 490 tells us. The author is unknown. It says if you don't know the author, use the work's title or a shortened version of the title in parentheses. So now I have to think, what is the title of this work? Because I don't have an author last name to put in the in-text citation. This is the title right there, Athletic Division. That's the title of this work. That's why I use that in quotation marks. Does that make sense? There's another way to figure out what goes in the in-text citation. And actually, you do the in-text citation after you create, does anybody know what? There's one other place where you give credit, other than the signal phrase in the in-text citation. One other place where you give credit. Anybody know where that's going to be? Number 3. I'm sure some of you have created one of these before.
Citation page?
Yes, works cited page at the end. So actually, if you want to know what goes in the in-text citation, if you create the works cited page first, you'll know exactly what goes in there because it has to match the first part of the works cited entry on that works cited page.
Is that why you're leaving topics on until Wednesday so we can kind of make our own works cited page?
Say it again.
Is that why you're kind of leaving the essay alone until Wednesday so we can work on our own works cited page?
No, not exactly. We're gonna work on that, but I just want to give you these basic principles first.
I got you. Okay.
All right, so there is my example. It's Athletic Division. That was the title of the work, and I put it in quotation marks. Because if you have titles of things, they go in quotation marks, unless they're titles of books. In that case, they go in italics instead of quotation marks. All right, so the basic format is down there. Example, author last name plus page number. But if you don't have that, you've got to move on to the next thing. You have to use your book to figure out what goes in there. Don't just take a guess. Don't just put the website address in there. Don't put www.Hall County Parks and Leisure. That's not what you're supposed to do. All right, there are rules and requirements for what goes in the in-text citation. And your book tells you exactly what to do. And if you're still unsure, you can ask me. Or you could ask our librarian, who's very helpful with documentation. All right, you can check with her too. Any of the library specialists can probably help you. All right, and the third place where you give credit is a works cited entry on the works cited page. And it looks like that. That's exactly what the works cited entry would look like for the website. I've got the title, and I figured this out because I went to page 484 again. This is your favorite number in the book. Page 484 is now your favorite page. It's where the menu starts. And if we're doing a list of works cited, you see that on page 485? Because this is different, right? There's the works cited entry and there's the in-text citation. They're related, but they're two different places where you're giving credit. So they're created different ways. So you go to the list of works cited. This is the list that appears on the last page of your document. And then we're going to look for a work from a website, because that's what we're dealing with. And it's actually an online source on page 486. Work from a website is number 30. A work from a website, and that tells us to go to what page? Follow along, people. What page? 508. So we go to page 508, and it tells us exactly what to do if we have a work from a website. It says author's last name and then first name. We don't have that. Uh-oh, what do I do? What do I do? I don't have the author's last name and first name, so what am I going to do to create this works cited entry?
Use the title.
Yes, you skip right to the title. You skip it. All right. Some people would say, well, put NA for not available or not applicable. Just skip it. Move on to the next thing that you have. All right, which would be the title. In that case, it would be athletic division. And your in-text citation. Here's a visual for you. Here's your essay. Here's your works cited page. Works cited. Don't abbreviate when you hand it in. It's going to say works cited. This is your actual essay, your heading. Here's a paragraph. Here's a paragraph. Now you want to include some information. You're going to do your signal phrase followed by direct quote. There's your direct quote. Here is your in-text citation right there. We're going to say the author's name was John Doe. We don't have a page number. Right here, I can guarantee you the beginning of the works cited entry is going to be Doe, comma, John, blah, 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 because this will always match this. The beginning of the works cited entry will always match what goes in the in-text citation. Always, always, always. The beginning matches the in-text citation. Everybody get that? All right, something else you need to be aware of. When you're punctuating this kind of stuff, when you're punctuating an in-text citation, notice the period goes outside of the parentheses. There's a reason for that. If the period went here after cheerleading, this is now floating between two sentences. If I put the period here, it says this is part of this sentence. This is all one sentence. This information came from here. This is encapsulating this citation with this sentence. It goes together. If you were to write another sentence here that took a direct quote from the website again, you would need another citation to go with that sentence that took some information. Every sentence you have that has information from a source needs an in-text citation. Even if you took two direct quotes from the same source. Don't just say, well, I put my citation at the end of the paragraph. Not good enough. If you have multiple sentences that had information from that source, you need multiple in-text citations. All right, so that period goes at the end there. Does that make sense? It encapsulates it. It keeps this from floating between sentences. And that's our works cited entry. It should look just like that. Works cited, centered at the top of the page, followed by your entry. I've got the year, I've got the medium, I've got the date. This, I believe, is the date of access, when I accessed it, which is important when you're dealing with online sources because they change. Websites disappear, websites get updated. So if I were to go look for this source as your instructor and say, I couldn't find it anywhere, you'd say, well, it was there on September 16th. And I would call Hall County and I'd say, hey, did you update your website since September 16th? And they would say, yes. I said, good, then my student's not in trouble. Does that make sense? All right, your works cited page. Not called the bibliography. You may have called it that before, but MLA asks you to label it as a works cited page. And that makes sense. These are the works that you are citing throughout your essay. If you cite them, that means there's an in-text citation, right? That's citing something. Don't have anything on your works cited page that you didn't cite in your essay. Maybe you went to Gwinnett County Parks and Rec website. And you're like, well, I went there, so I better put that on my works cited page. Well, if you didn't cite any information from there, if you didn't take a direct quote, then you don't need that on there. And if you did go to the Gwinnett County page and you got an idea from there that ended up in your paper, then it better be quoted and cited in your paper somewhere. Does that make sense? Anything that's on your works cited page needs to be cited. That's why it's called works cited. All right, it's the last page of your document, not a separate document. You don't have to create a new file. You don't create a new file to create the works cited. It's the last page. Your entries should appear in alphabetical order by the first part of the entry. Usually that's the author's last name. Usually, but sometimes you don't have an author's last name. So you know that athletic department is going to go before Doe, John, or athletic division, I think it was, right? That was the title. So alphabetical order according to whatever the first part of the entry is. Here's an example. Is there a problem with this one? What's the problem? Very good. Cost starts with a C. That should be first entry, not last entry. I don't know why the student did this. This is a student example. I don't know why the student did this, but I'm guessing the student said, well, here are my authors, and here's one that didn't have an author last name, so I'll put that last, or something like that. But that doesn't work. C goes before F. Is there another problem? What do red squiggly lines indicate? Spelling issues, right? That was easily corrected. All right, other things to remember. Your in-text citations are referred to as parenthetical citations. I mentioned that. You need to create the works cited entry for your source before you create the in-text citation, because the in-text citation is always based on the beginning of the works cited entry, right? So you create this first. That way you know what goes in these parentheses. If you do this first, you'll always know what goes in there. And these two things are always related. As I'm reading your essay, as I'm reading this particular example right here on the board, I get to the point where I see Doe, and I want to learn more information. I want to see the original source. Well, now I know to just go to the works cited page, scan down the left side because it's in alphabetical order. I scan down the left side, I look for D. I find it says it was from the Washington Post from December 2013. Now I know where to find that information. Go to the library website and I can pull it right up. Or the Washington Post website and I can pull it right up. Some things to know. You don't have to include the URL for websites. You don't have to, which is like that long HTTPS, www. Right? You don't have to include that unless you feel like you don't have enough information. You know how sometimes you skip the author last name because it's not there? Well, if there's no title of the organization and you leave that out, and there's no date that it was published and you leave that out, you might feel like there's not a lot of information here, you might not be able to find it. In that case, you can include the URL, right, which is the address. You also have to use hanging indent, which is indenting your paper just like the example. See how the last name or the first part of the entry hangs out over the left-hand side? That's done intentionally. That's not just because MLA wanted to make a weird rule. That's actually so that when I scan down the left side, I can more easily identify the sources. Does that make sense? So you have to use that. And that's tricky. That's why, if you've never done that before, that's one of the hardest parts of creating a works cited page. All right, getting that hanging indent to work. But usually you can do it just by typing, wait till it moves on to the next line, put your cursor there, hit enter, and then tab. You should be in good shape. Any questions about MLA documentation? Thrilling, exciting stuff, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is boring. It can't get any more boring than this, honestly. But it's important. Just because it's boring doesn't mean it's not important. It's probably the most crucial part of the writing process. If you don't get it right, you could have a good argument, but you still get a failing grade on the essay because you messed up the documentation. So be really careful. Remember my advice. Proceed slowly and cautiously. And we will talk more about Essay 1 on Wednesday, but the information is available in Angel if you want it.